Hey, welcome everyone to the From the Shadows podcast. I'm your host, Shane Grove. And before we get started with this week's episode, I just want to remind everybody to go check us out at FromTheShadowsPodcast.com. There you can find all sorts of good stuff, links to all of our social media, including the TikTok page, which you will never find me dancing on or singing, but I think maybe we can get Phil, the producer, to dance a little bit on there if we ask him nicely. But also there at the website, there's a contact button. If you have a story or you just want to get a hold of us and, tell us you love the show. If you don't like the show, send those emails to Wes Germer at Sasquatch Chronicles. Tell him you don't like our show. He would love to hear that. So, so with that being said, you can also contact me through the Facebook pages or Shane Grove Author on Instagram. We'd love to hear from you. And just go check us out, check out our other episodes, and see what's happening on Facebook and Instagram every day. Need our social media queen does a great job of getting stuff up there. So yeah, go hang out and participate. So with that being said, I'm bringing on a guest. So if you're watching on YouTube, you can already see that he's literally sitting on a throne. Okay. There's no skulls on the throne that I can see, but I told him before we got on, I'm super jealous of his chair. I mean, this is how all podcast hosts should rock the mic is on a chair like that. So joining us is, and I don't want to just call you author because I think that's shortchanging everything that you have done and are doing and have knowledge of. So I'm just going to say the magnificent. What does that on your email say? The king, or what does it say? What does your email say? It says
Sir Kyl.
Sir Kyle. So joining us is Sir Kyl Cobb. Kyle, welcome to the From the Shadows podcast. How you doing?
Doing great. How are you today?
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. So Kyle, you were recommended to me by, and I don't even know when this episode comes out, if her episode will be out, but Sonia Lee, the great country slash just any kind of music songwriter and performer. She said that we would really vibe and have a lot to talk about. And I was like, really? And then as soon as I met you and got to talk to you, I realized I don't have anything to talk about. You know way more than me. So there's nothing I should be saying. You should be talking. So Kyle, tell our audience like what your career has been like in the paranormal field.
Sure. Kind of my general introduction. I have spent a lifetime studying the evolution of ancient religions. I'm referred to as a demonologist, or demonologist is what we call ourselves these days because there's no prejudice religiously one way or the other. I've traveled to 60 countries. I've studied 24 different religions. I'm currently working on a dissertation with the University of Wales, Trinity St. David, in ancient religions. And I have been involved learning ancient religions since I was about 13 years old. I had a college professor who gave up his teaching position at the university to come and teach middle school. And he decided that when he did that, we were part of the gifted program. He decided that he would give us his college level curriculum, which was in ancient Greek. And so I didn't know it at the time, but I was departing on a lifetime of exploration in ancient religions and different cultures. And eventually that led me kind of on a quest. After my father passed away, I had grown up Southern Baptist, and I couldn't reconcile his painful death with the world around me. So at age 18, while still in college, I started traveling the world. And I was lucky to get to go to some amazing places. I'm an old man now, but back then I was young, filled with adventure, and I was traveling in at that point the decaying Soviet Union. I was in Berlin, and I was in Poland and back then it was Czechoslovakia. There were Soviet soldiers marching, and it was a brilliant time. But along the way, as I got to start, I guess, interested in history and the religious aspects of it, I took the training that Dr. Gooden had given me back then and kind of turned it into my life. So I've spent literally my whole life exploring the unknown, and I really enjoyed it. But I never had any intention of becoming a demonologist or a demonologist or a paranormal investigator. But as part of my travels, one of the things I did was I had a really poorly maintained website, but it had tens of thousands of photos from around the world, including some that would get me in trouble today because there may be some gray areas about legality in certain countries. But it was one of those things that there was a young lady in trouble, and her friends knew about my website, and so they reached out to me. And a little bit of my backstory: I've been really lucky. A lot of really great people have invited me in to do things that were just really neat. So, at age 18, I was working for CNN. In addition to going to college, I ended up going to Superstation TBS and lecturing across the U.S. with that. And just as part of this whole thing, it was like the universe was putting me somewhere that I hadn't been before. Then the radio station launched in Atlanta called 99X back in '93. And I was really lucky to get to be friends with a lot of them and began to work on a radio show on Sundays called Organic X. And that opened a lot of opportunities. And the reason I go into that part of the story, I mentioned there was a young lady who needed help in Atlanta. And they reached out to me and they said, hey, there's something after this young lady and her child. Her child was about 3 at the time. And my response to them was, I'm not a paranormal investigator. But as it turned out, I had just met about 6-7 months earlier Jay and Grant from the TV show Ghost Hunters. And, Grant's a great guy. 30 years later, I still bump into him frequently. But I met those guys. She needed help. She thought there was something paranormal after her, or after her and her son in this case. And so I reached out to Ghost Hunters, and this was when their show was just getting started. And so they weren't available, and they gave me a local team. I was in Atlanta at that point, and I reached out or took the team that they recommended, and I vetted them, and they were kind of con artists. They would find businesses haunted for the right price and put them on their ghost tour. So that wasn't an option. And so as I felt this girl was sincere about her fear. And so I conned some of my friends into doing my first paranormal investigation formally. And I leveraged all the different things I had learned in my religious studies, in my travels, and even, I'm kind of ashamed to admit, even some of the stuff on the ghost shows that were just beginning to start at that point. And it just turned out it was real. And I'm a really critical skeptic. So I debunk more than 99% of the stuff I go after. And this had something that was active. So our very first time out attempting to help this lady, we saw incredible things. We had blinds that were pulled back and something looked out. There was a point where my best friend and his son were there as part of the people I'd conned into doing the first adventure. They were changing batteries, and I bought a bunch of standalone remote cameras back then, and they were changing battery, and something said, "Watch this." Meanwhile, in another room, one of the cameras picked up this fuzzy object, not exactly parallel, but just a few seconds afterwards, they had heard the "watch this," picked up this fuzzy object moving toward the camera, and it shakes the camera. Um, Even to this day, something like that's just super, super rare for me to bump into. And then as the adventure continued that night, we thought we were done. We packed up. We were outside, and that's what, as I mentioned before, something pulled back the blinds. We all Scooby Doo style ran back in to see what was going on because we had closed all the doors, and we'd even put tape over the doors to show that we sealed them and all that. Um, so we go back in, nothing there. We're looking around, and suddenly behind us on the bedroom that had been the child's, something started pounding against the door. I'm not giving up any trade secrets to say several members of our little expedition may have had whiffs of urine as they fled the room for the outside, but opened up the door, nothing there. So it was a real hit that first night. After we
I
left that location,
I gotta be honest
yeah,
with you. Grant and Jay really screwed up because that sounds better than 99% of the ones expeditions they showed on TV.
well, that's the cool thing. Their first
Yeah,
couple years, they debunked most of the stuff that we had
yeah,
asked.
yeah.
This just happened to be a home run. And the final punchline to that is okay. So we leave, and literally while I'm in the car heading back to where I lived at that point, I get a phone call from the young lady who and there's a whole big backstory about the encounter. But she's like, "Can I go home to get some clothes?" Because when they had the most recent attack, they abandoned everything, including leaving their dog because they were too scared to get the dog, and I had to get the dog rescued out. But she calls and says, "Can I go home to get my clothes?" So I said, "Well, nothing hurt us, and so yeah, it should be okay." And about, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes later, somewhere in there, she calls back just sobbing, and she's screaming, saying, "There's something pounding on my baby's door." And I hadn't told her anything about our encounter like that. So that was
Wow.
the very first out of the gate paranormal, and it never stopped since then. It's been uh, more cases than I can literally count, and then gradually, as um, people knew that I had studied the ancient religions and studied the evolution of the idea of demonic concept, it got to where if there was a paranormal team that was scared off a case, I was the guy they called as tech support, so to speak. Um, as I got to have a better and better reputation, it would be if a priest messes up an exorcism, I began to be the guy that got called. If there was something that was quote unquote too terrifying to deal with, I took those cases.
Now
And
what? Now, okay. So what did you do? Like that. So that first case, obviously there was something there. Were you able to do anything to get it out of there,
so,
or
so
was
the
it
deal,
so early that you just didn't have any clue
I
what to
didn't
do?
know at that point how to get it out, but it became moot because when the girl called me back and gave the exchange I relayed, she abandoned the house completely. They never went back. She left her stuff there and moved.
Wow.
And about 6 months later, it caught up with her, but that's a whole other story. But
Oh, jeez.
in 6 months' time, I was able to start to leverage some stuff. One of the things that makes me different than the demonologist or demonologist you see on TV is most of them, their education either came from just watching a television show, or they may have read a book or two, but they've generally, when they do that, they only focus on generally the Catholic and Christian aspects of what a demon is. And I don't do that. I've gone beyond that. So I studied both the Christian concepts, I've studied the Jewish concepts, I've studied the Islamic concepts, I've studied um, earlier. So if we're talking about Assyrian and Babylonian and Mesopotamian, I've studied those. Mesopotamian, actually, when we look at Sumer and Accadia, the modern exorcisms are actually based on their exorcisms. Even the Christian idea of baptism actually comes from Sumer. And so I had studied that, and then I went further. So when I got as far backwards as I could in the Sumerian. I said, well, I understand how the overlay of Judaism, Zoroastrianism, Christianity, and other religions have overlaid on top of the early concepts in the West. But I wanted to know more, so I started looking into the East. So I looked into in India what their understanding of demons were, Tibet, Nepal, ancient China, pre-communist China, ancient Japan, Indonesia, and even how when the humans jumped the pond, so to speak, and came over to North and South America and were relatively isolated for a long period of time, they have those same concepts in a lot of the early religions here in the Americas. So I was able to leverage that. One of the toys I actually have, I have a collection of these. This is called a furba, and these are from northeastern India, Nepal, Tibet. This is a weapon used to kill gods and demons. I don't know whether you can see that.
Oh, I can see it. It goes right with the chair. I got to be honest. It goes with the chair.
So it's a 3-bladed weapon, and it's broken up into 3 segments, and it's a 3-faced deity on it. And the idea is it's designed to kill gods and demons. So about 1000 AD, they were using wooden versions, and they would literally crucify the person onto the ground to get the demon out. And because the difference between Western concepts and Eastern, in the West, because of a really bad mistranslation, we believe that demons are immortal, intangible, and invisible, right? You can't kill a god, you can't kill a demon. In the East, though, they didn't have that understanding.
Okay.
So they believe that they're physical beings, just like you and me, sort of, more powerful, but that they can change perceptions. And so they can just make it so we can't see them, we can't perceive them. And there's some science behind that. You know, we as human beings, our hearing and our vision are the best they ever are when we're children, but we only see a tiny little range of the visible spectrum and only hear a tiny little range of audio. And so what happens is, that's the reason, like on some of the TV shows, they pretend to be filming at night. Most of them don't really, honestly. If you watch carefully, you'll see most of them are computer colorized to look like they're at night. And that's because of insurance liability. But that's a different story. But, you know, the thing
We're
is,
leaving that in, I'm just telling you. So go ahead.
That's okay. The reason or the theory behind why you hunt at night is so you can use equipment, in this case, infrared, that during the daylight wouldn't work. So you, in theory, have a lot bigger range that you can see using some of this equipment. Now, I will also tell you that the idea of catching stuff in infrared like they do on television is mostly crap. And the reason I say that is because if you think about it, all these security cameras record hundreds of millions, if not billions of hours of infrared camera footage a year, right? And if there was as much paranormal as they want to claim on TV shows, we'd be getting stuff daily. But the reality is, that's not working. You'll see also on some of the shows they'll use ultraviolet during the daytime. Again, same thing. Whatever we're trying to see perceptually, we don't have the tools completely to capture on wide scale, or it really doesn't exist on wide scale. And that's more often my experience, that most of the time, like I said, I disprove stuff. There used to be a show on TBS called Adam Ruins Everything. That's the joke with my friends. Kyl ruins it. And, you know, it's one of those things that people send me photos all the time and, you know, potential cases. And I'm like, okay, you know, that photo of an orb is a bug. That one is, you know, dust particles, water vapor, etc. So and that's part of what I really do. So as someone who's a demonologist, if someone calls up and says, I've got this person that they claim to be, under the influence of something demonic, can you help them? I'll spend a couple hours on the phone doing an interview with them. And there's some things I test for along the way. And only a few people even get past those tests. And, if they make it past that, I'll ask a local paranormal team usually to go do a preliminary investigation and just try to verify some of the stuff. We never at a charge to the client, never ever. That's one of my cardinal rules. I don't accept money. I don't accept donations. I don't work with any paranormal teams that accept money or donations. It's got to be pure because there can't be any alternative motivations. There's too many teams out there that try to profiteer off of the paranormal, and that sits wrong with me. Even with my books, like I sell my paranormal books basically at cost, and anybody who's met me at a convention knows I probably give away 5 books for every book I actually sell. Because I'll see someone at the convention who can't afford to buy the book, and I'm like, well, and they'll talk to me about, yeah, this is what's going on, yada yada, and I'll be like, here, just take this. So money can't be the driver, and I know that in today's society that's kind of weird. I know, but this has to be for me. It has to be a devotion, because if I'm willing to put my life or handle someone else's life that's in danger, they have to know they can trust me, and they have to know that whatever I'm trying to do for them, I'm trying to do it in their best interest.
So the question I have then is, as you're going to these quote unquote haunted houses or paranormal happenings, is it all demons, or is there a regular haunting? Like, is there a difference? Or
There's lots of different categories. Like, generally break it up into 2 different big broad categories. We have what's considered an intelligent haunt, which means you can interface with it and get some kind of response potentially. It has intellect, so it's not kind of time fixed. Then there's the non-intelligent, and the way we then kind of subdivide all of that. A non-intelligent is a good example of what we call a residual haunt. Periodically, a train moves down a track where it hasn't traveled in 40 years. A lady in white walks through a door, goes out on the landing, starts to walk down the step, and disappears over and over again every day. Those happen regardless of whether there's someone interacting with them or not. It's literally almost like a slip in time. And then the intelligent category, we break it down into there's technically kind of halfway between intelligent and not intelligent. There's a poltergeist, which basically that's the word poltergeist is German, and it means noisy spirits. There's poltergeist is a category, and I've only had 2 legitimate poltergeist cases. I've debunked a lot of other ones that I'll claim to be, but that's neither here nor there. Then we have something that we today refer to as an apparition or a ghost. And then the third category is demonic. And in trying to diagnose those different entities, there's different kind of, for lack of better terms, a checkbox. It's that kind of go through and say, okay, is it this? No. Is it this? No. Can it do this? No. And to try to classify it. But, it just, there's difference in magnitude. So I routinely will go to do investigations that someone claims that they have just a generic haunting, an apparition. And sometimes it's a figment of their imagination. Sometimes they've watched one too many ghost shows. And sometimes they just need to dust really well. But, it's one of those things that those are usually the easy cases. Most of them are not really even hauntings. It's people's imagination. It's air in the pipes of their house, and that's what I mentioned earlier. The ghost hunters, that's what they did their first 2 seasons. Is they literally said, "Hey, no, this isn't haunted, and this is why." That's Kyl's majority of the investigations I do. That's why Kyl ruins it, right? And then you get sometimes really exceptional places. There's a little bed and breakfast outside of Nashville. It's in a place called Red Boiling Springs, and in and of itself, it's been there. This particular hotel's been there 100 years. There's nothing on the surface that you'd say, "Hey, this is a super haunted place," but of all the places I've traveled, and again, I've traveled all over the world and done investigations all over the world, this little place in middle of nowhere at Red Boiling Springs that's called the Thomas House Hotel is one of the most haunted places I've ever been. And I've actually collectively spent over 300 nights there. I've been going for 12 years. And for me to drive to a place that far away from me and that remote for a haunting says something about the quality. And what makes it special, not only is it sitting on top of, it's in a mineral springs area. So there's underneath the hotel hundreds of thousands of gallons an hour of water rushing over the line. So there's lots of energy in the air. In the late 1700s, French trappers, because back then Tennessee was still the cutting edge of America, trappers reported seeing will-o-wisp come up. And based on the descriptions, it actually is the exact same location that this hotel now sits on. And but then when I guess makes it really special is a cult called Anzara owned a lot of the town back from 88 from 88 until 92. And I know based on a report of an eyewitness that they were an Armageddon cult, and they practiced summoning rituals, trying to summon the dead and demons. I don't think they got any demons. And it's been featured on a few different television shows, but the TV shows lie. But everybody who's ever died on that property is there. There's a little boy who identified himself. He told us his name. He's told us how he died. He speaks with a Ralph Appalachian accent like this. It turns out, based on just the information that this entity provided, we were able to find his obituary.
Are you serious?
Yeah, and it's amazing. And then a few years ago, his brother passed away, and I had gone up to try to just do the normal thing I do at the hotel, and I happened to bump into someone who knew him and knew his brother, and they even gave me a different spin on it slightly. So it's an incredible place. So that's kind of and this apparitions that are at this hotel are more defined in most places. Like I can set my keys. Some nights I'll be there by myself. Well, sort of. The owners of the hotel lock themselves after dark away in a section of the hotel and don't ever come out. So when I'm staying there, 90% of the building is vacant. And so I've set my keys, for instance, gone into the room, my favorite room there, and I'll set my keys on like the sink and turn around to unpack my suitcase, and my keys will be gone when I turn around. But I don't panic because I know that 2 to 3 hours later, the little boy, Edwin, will give them back. It's his game. And I even had that happen on camera once. So the keys disappear. I proceed. I do a live broadcast because I'm just want to show people this place. I do a live broadcast. So I bring the equipment in, my paranormal equipment, and on camera, I unpack my paranormal equipment. They can see that, people see on camera everything that I'm doing. I do my little walkthrough and talk to folks. I come back toward the end of the broadcast, and I'm like, okay, I appreciate y'all, joining me. And I pick up one of the bags that had been in my locked case in the car when my original keys disappeared. I pick up it's a Crown Royal bag that I keep prompt items in, and I pick it up to put stuff back into it, and my keys fall out of the bag. So it's just it's got some amazing stuff, and the TV shows it's been on a few of the shows, but they all lie and they fake stuff. And I'll go on record saying that. But it's still it's a super active.
If it's so active, why would they have to lie and fake stuff?
Because paranormal can't be done on an assembly line basis. There was a show, for instance, that had a guy whose father may be a famous rock star, and they immediately claimed that there was some kind of elemental or something there. Never seen any evidence of that. There was the very first show that was there. There is, and the way the TV shows work, some of them anyway, it isn't the way they present it on TV, obviously. So a B-reel team will go and actually do some filming sometimes in advance before the talent gets there. And the talent or the B team actually experienced a paranormal phenomena while they were doing their B-reels. And when the talent got there, sometimes they may reenact those type of events. So it's all about timing. You
to
just
make it seem like it happened to them.
Right.
Now, okay, so you're saying all this energy is below this place. So is the energy trapping or attracting the energy of the deceased people?
Well, and this is going to get me down another rabbit hole. I don't know that apparitions or ghosts are dead people. So that's one of maybe the first differences between me and some of the other folks. I try to look for science, and I think we're gradually our science, which right now it's the bleeding edge, so it's still kind of just as fringe as believing it's dead people. But one of the things that I'm looking into is there's something called M as in magic theory or M theory, and it's called magic with air quotes because with one of the guys who helped create it was asked, "What does the M stand for?" He said, "I don't know, just call it magic." But it's where they tried to reconcile why mathematics for planets isn't the same as mathematics for atoms. And for over 150 years, we've tried to do that. We couldn't. And some really, really smart mathematicians realized that if you have multiple, so we're fourth dimensional creatures, right? We have length, width, height, and we move through time as the fourth dimension. And if you have 11 dimensions, the math starts to work. And sometimes when you're reading it all, it could say 13, but the idea is 11-ish dimensions. The math suddenly works. And you can use the same calculus for planets as you do for quarks. And at that point, one of the things it does is it helps reinforce, if you've seen a Marvel TV show or movie, I don't think anybody's seen them lately, but if you actually went to see a Marvel movie, they deal with a multiverse, right?
Yeah.
That's where part of this multiverse idea comes from, because if under M theory, you have to have infinite parallel universes. And so the way I describe it is, imagine, for today's kids, we'll use a modern example. If you have a pixel on a screen and it's moving around kind of at random on its screen, right? Imagine that there's an infinite number of other pixels that are also moving around. And when those two bump together, that may be our paranormal. So we may be their ghost and they may be our ghost. And when you start looking at it that way, it takes a lot of the fear factor out. It takes a lot of the religious connotations out, because suddenly when you see a ghost of a Civil War soldier, it's not a dead Civil War soldier. It's that soldier in his reality, in his time, that you're just kind of seeing a window on him. And it starts that when you start looking that way, some of the stuff makes sense. And I could go down a whole rabbit hole of hours on
Well,
talking about this.
the movie The Others with
Yeah,
Nicole Kidman, and
yeah,
where they, they thought their house was, she thinks the house is haunted, and here comes, her husband back from the war, and the whole time is she's the ghost.
right, right.
And yeah, oh yeah, and if you start going down that rabbit hole, it kind of bends your mind a little bit.
Yeah,
Um,
but it changes everything
mhm.
because suddenly what we're interacting with, let's say it broadens our reality and it explains things too. Like I talked about the residual haunts, like something repeating over and over again. Well, if I have two realities and they just kind of think of them as balloons, if those two kind of touch, that there's nothing to say that each one of those balloons has time moving in the same way or at the same speed or caught up with each other. So at the point they touch, the reoccurring event is kind of a snapshot of their reality and their time because it doesn't move at the same rate as ours. So their 2 seconds for us could be generations. And when we talk about things like you see on the TV shows and talk about power drain or cold spots, there's an idea that, so if you have two balloons, right, when you push them together, they both kind of flatten out, right?
Yeah.
And there's a rule in our universe that says all the energy and matter that exists has to be constant, or at least that's the theory. Maybe not really, but anyway, but the idea is a constant amount of energy inside the balloon, constant amount of air inside the balloon. But if you imagine, then you take your finger, and if you push the balloon, you're putting energy into it, right? You're stretching it and changing the inside. But when you remove your finger, it bounces back because it has to offset the energy that you put into it. And so that can be used to say, oh, that's where cold spot may come from. That's where battery drain, maybe.
Mm.
But it's the idea that some of the stuff that we attribute to paranormal probably isn't. But maybe it won't be in my lifetime that we can unravel it. But I think there's a lot of there's a lot of like academia.com where scholars publish stuff that's kind of all over the place. And regularly, there are a lot of really smart people from places like Duke, the Ryan Institute there, University of West Georgia, that William Roll used to lecture at. There's a lot of really smart professors that are working on trying to understand what paranormal really is from a science perspective.
I, it's I mean, it's obviously something. Okay. I mean, there's too much evidence. I mean, I've experienced stuff. You've obviously experienced stuff, and it just it's something. I mean, that's about as simple as I can put it. It's
Yeah.
something. Now, so as far as demons go,
Mm-hmm.
how many times have you run into a demon?
I got hundreds and hundreds of case calls, and I can count the number of times that I've encountered one on one hand. Um, there have been a couple times that have been really terrifying, and most of the time, though, it's not. Most of the time, it has nothing to do with demons. So if you out of so I, before COVID, let me put it in context. Before COVID, I was fielding about 200 calls from around the world a month. And that involved lots of time on my part screening calls, um, organizing teams around the world to do the follow-ups and all of that. During COVID, I kind of shut it down. I said, I'm getting, this can't continue. Nobody can travel. Nobody can do anything. So I would still occasionally take the raw referral and just try to walk people through it. Post COVID, I've still kind of kept that. So I still don't do a ton of cases. When the phone rings, though, do still pick it up and take care of it. There have been a couple that have been honestly terrifying. For me, the poltergeist cases are more terrifying than a demonic case.
Why is that?
for me, the poltergeist cases are more terrifying than a demonic case.
Why is that?
In a demonic case, you know what you're dealing with to some extent.
Okay.
Poltergeist, we believe that a gentleman named William Roll, who was an expert in poltergeist, came up with the idea that it's a spontaneous, reoccurring telekinetic event. And in those cases, the idea may be somebody who has, let's say, latent abilities to do things with their mind becomes the catalyst for it. So it's kind of a subconscious reaction. I had a poltergeist case where a young girl had always thought she was seeing dead people. And then her parents got a divorce. And then suddenly the house began to experience things like exploding the little like tulip lights on the fan. They would shatter, and the globes around them would shatter, and it would rain down glass on the father because the girl blamed the father. Plates flying out, and all sorts of there's just so much danger, and it's, you can't see where it's coming from. You don't know where it's coming from. It's just there. Whereas a demonic, I describe those encounters as it's not, demons aren't like in the movies. Okay, it's not like you're going to have the bleeding walls or any of the stuff they faked in the Amityville Horror, or you don't have the fly infestations and all of that necessarily with a demon. I describe demons as being like mosquitoes. We allegedly may be their food. They may feed off us our bioenergy. And if you're a mosquito, the last thing you want to do is catch someone's attention, right? If you're biting my arm, you don't want me to notice it and slap you, right? And a demonic's very much the same thing. It's the drug users, it's the mentally ill, it's the feeble. Those are the kind of people that are targeted, and they want to go under the radar
because they can't fight back, or that there's nobody paying attention.
The victims,
the victim can't fight back, and nobody's paying attention to them. And
right. Wow. And it's not like that's the only victim that they're hitting either. They could be hitting one there at that house and one 2 or 3 miles away and 2 or 3. So it's like a feeding cycle, just again, like a mosquito. The idea is they fly around and they have targets of opportunity. And as long as they have those targets of opportunity, they feed. So where, even from a Christian exorcism perspective, what a Christian exorcism says is, well, we can't hurt it because it's an intangible and immortal and invisible, but we can ask it really nicely to leave. And that's literally what a Christian exorcism is. The Catholic Church has a formal exorcism that requires permission from the bishop, and there's certain criteria that have to be met before they'll do it. 99% of the exorcisms related to the Catholic Church, though, are not formal. They are basically, they're called minor exorcisms is one of the terms, but they're basically prayers that but both of those exorcisms, whether it's the minor exorcism or the formal exorcism, all that's really doing is it's asking the demon nicely to leave, and invoking Christ or God to intervene on their behalf, and using that as kind of the big stick to drive the demon away. And that it's also, when you're talking about an exorcism from a Christian perspective, a real formal exorcism, it's not, again, like in the movies. It's, you do one for 30 minutes. There's a gap usually where they prostrate, and the Catholic tradition do a Hail Mary, and they do the prostration on the ground, and you repeat that over and over again, sometimes up to 8 hours a day, and sometimes these can last weeks or months. And that's actually, in the case of Anneliese Michel, you may have seen the movie The Exorcism of Emily Rose. That's loosely based on it. That's actually what killed her. In that case, the priests were crazy, or at least one of them was, and wanted to be famous. And he ended up killing the poor girl by having exorcism so much that it destroyed her kneecaps because she kept prostrating, and she starved herself because she was told that if she fasted, it would help her religiously. And so we contrast the Catholic side of things. Most of the other Christian denominations do what we call a deliverance ceremony, which again is free-formed exorcism. It's basically prayers. And if you ever see someone in the news that died in an exorcism, most often it's a deliverance ceremony because different denominations, some of them believe you can beat the devil out of someone. And
my dad was performing an exorcism. Is that what you're saying?
We'll go there.
Okay. So you said in your studies, in every religion, they have demons, right? So what if it is a Hindu demon possessing the person? The Christian stuff is pay attention to the Christian ceremony to exorcism to get rid of it.
Not necessarily, but it doesn't care what it, again, like slapping at the mosquito. Yeah. It doesn't necessarily care what the words are. It doesn't care what the ceremonies are as much as it cares about the annoyance of someone kind of swatting at it. Mm-hmm. One of the things I found kind of to flip that, I showed the furba. It's also called the Kyl Cobb. This was a weapon that, if you were in India, you may use to get rid of something that allegedly is going after a Christian one way or the other. So it's more about the tool and about the method you use to swat at it.
Mm. Mm. So you've come into contact with the couple. What was the terrifying parts about it?
The worst thing. So I have a case that went really, really south. First time I ran up against something that I should have been afraid of and wasn't. I won't go into all the details, but there was a case, and again, I was working out of Atlanta, or maybe I'd already left it at that time, but the case was back in Atlanta, and there were two young ladies that had gotten the attention of something, and I made the mistake of not realizing its strength until it was too late, and I told them they needed to take a hiatus away while we dealt with it, and I made the mistake of doing that in the proximity of where it could hear me, and it went after me. I've told this story just a few times. It was in August, and it was one of those really hot years, so it was in the hundreds, days and days in a row, and it went after me, and it told me. So let me back up for a second to break the drama. The term possession is a mistranslation. It doesn't really mean what we think it means. It's not like the TV show Supernatural, where we're meat suits and a cloud of black smoke slides into our body and takes over. That's not really what it is. The word literally from the Greek means to suggest. So it's putting thoughts in your mind, and they're your thoughts.
Okay.
And so in this particular case, like I said, 100-degree weather in Atlanta, it came after me and it said, "You're cold." So for the next 6 weeks, I was wearing heavy winter coats. I was wrapped in blankets. I went to doctors. They examined me. There's nothing wrong with you, other than you burning yourself up in jackets and blankets. It was truly terrifying. That was the second encounter that I'd had that happen to me. And that one was the worst. Like I said, it took me out for 6 weeks. It almost took me out for the rest of my life. It was rough.
Well, yeah, that's wearing that stuff in 100 degree, he could just kill you. And
Yeah,
so it was trying to kill you at your
it
own
was
hands,
it was
basically.
trying and it was trying to take me off the board.
Yeah.
So it had somebody to feed on, and was I thought it had it good, and I needed to be out of the way. Another just quick example where I've seen that type thing happen. Um, when you're doing a paranormal investigation, you generally, unless you're stupid like I can be sometimes, but you generally try to put a team together of anywhere from 3 to 5 individuals, something relatively small. Um, I had a case where, as part of it, we would spend as this was in a historic house. They had only reported some displacement of objects and seeing some stuff go on there. And so I wasn't starting in the investigation with the idea it was anything demonic. And we would methodically spend about 45 minutes to an hour on, and then take a break for 10 to 50 minutes to go to the bathroom, change flashlight batteries, etc. And in this particular case, we had just done that. We went up to the upstairs area to a part we had not investigated before. And when we went into this um, doorway, as we started going to the room, at that point, it's myself and it's 3 investigators. Um, one of them, who had just gone to the bathroom literally 5 minutes earlier, is like, I got to go pee. I got to go pee real bad, and turns around and abandons us. About half a second later, the other 2 individuals who were with me simultaneously both say, my batteries are dead in my flashlight. I can't see. I got to go get new flashlight batteries. From my perspective, their flashlights are working fine.
You can see them, but they're still.
But they think that they're now in the dark with their flashlights not working. And so they abandoned me. And in that particular instance, I'm left standing in the doorway, and a large, darker than dark figure, to steal a term, comes literally rushing at me and knocks me out of the way, just like I was a tissue paper. Um, and so, those are two kind of extremes, but the idea is the same. It's a suggestion. You can choose to ignore the suggestion, but you have to be darn clever about it, and you have to understand that it's not your thought. And that, like I said, to me, poltergeists are even more terrifying because you can't resist. There's nothing to do other than duck a lot. But it's with demonics. It can be scary, and they don't go at you straight on usually. They try to go to the side. They try to take something off the board that you're related to, and that's why it's also very kind of solitary. There are a lot of cases. I have people all the time. Can I be your apprentice? Can I do X, Y, Z? The answer is always no. I can risk my life. I'm not going to risk other people's. And so if I know it's something truly demonic, I'll take the risk, but I don't want to bring anybody else into that.
So, okay. So as we wrap this up, I want to touch on your lifelong study on different religions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so my question to you is how have you found that they are related? Are they all, I mean, in your opinion, do they all come from one place and have just been uh, assimilated to whatever the culture is? And then, I mean, did they all start one place, or are they, some of them, totally separate from each other, and and just are totally different? I mean, what is out there, like, what would bring people together of different religions if they understood all religions?
Well, I have two different answers for you.
Okay.
So linguistically, women far smarter than I am have been able to go through, and the majority of the world's languages have certain linguistic roots.
Mm-hmm.
So words that all humans or most humans share. Mama, or some variation of that, is one of those words. And part of that has to do with the way that humans actually form the parts to actually communicate. But one of the things that they believe they know is if you boil most of the world's languages down for the word God, there's a word that we believe is called Deus. And you hear that echoed in a lot of different religions. If you're Catholic, that's Deus for God, Dios in Spanish. If you go backwards a little bit, the Greek god, the head of the Greek gods, the Greek storm god, today we call him Zeus. That wasn't really always necessarily his name. It could have been Deus as well. Because if you go to the Zeus temples, they actually have Deus, but you couldn't have your Christian god and your Greek god name the same thing. If you go back further, you can find that gods like Zeus actually share a lot of the properties of a storm god called Hadad, which, to tie that into the demons, you would, from a Christian perspective, you probably have heard him called Baal or Baal Hadad or Beelzebub. That was actually, Hadad was the most powerful, popular god throughout the Mediterranean for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. And that's the reason he's the bad guy in the Jewish text, because literally when we think of Jerusalem, we think of it's just the Jews that live there, but that wasn't true. Jerusalem was located in the south of Canaan. And so all the Canaanite gods were actually there as well. And one of the leading temples in Jerusalem, even during the periods when the Jews were powerful there, was Hadad's temple. And so Baal is a title. So Baal Hadad literally meant Lord of the Storm. And the Jews would make fun of him by saying that he's not, or Baal Hadad, they would say Lord or Lord of the Earth. And so they would say he's not the Lord of the storm or the Lord of the earth. He's the Lord of flies. And that's where Beelzebub comes from. It's a slur. But as you trace all of these back, you see this idea of these storm gods going all the way back to ancient Sumer. And you say, well, maybe that's the origin. But this Deus goes earlier than that. And there are some indications that the representation of the golden bull, which are used in all of these different storm gods, whether you're talking about Zeus or Hadad or even earlier incarnations, they have a bull that's their symbol. But where it gets even more interesting, though, is when we look at Sumer, we say up until 1995, we thought that's where human history began, right? We thought that's where we got kind of unified as a people and got ourselves together and stopped being hunter-gatherers and learned architecture and how to domesticate cattle and how to domesticate and grow agriculture. But then in 1995, we found out that's all a lie. We found out our knowledge was so much smaller than we thought. We discovered a place in Turkey called Göbekli Tepe. Mm-hmm. And at that time, they announced that these giant temples that had 18-foot tall columns with 3D carvings on them. And the amazing thing was, we said that couldn't have happened, right? Because that would have taken thousands of people and years to build. And that required specialization, right? If someone's going to be a stone carver, someone has to feed them. So all the things we thought we knew about reality were wrong. And as we dug around Göbekli Tepe, they started looking around the rest of the region. And they found that not only is Göbekli Tepe this giant temple city, which, by the way, they won't finish excavating because it's only about 5% excavated, but the religious influence is at least one of the things that have stopped it, because different religions don't want their world to be turned over. Mm-hmm. But in some ways, it reinforces it. We found that Göbekli Tepe, though, this religious center, actually has 16 cities at least around it.
Holy.
that and the thing is, so Göbekli Tepe, we think was built around 8700 BC. And about 700 years later, they buried it intentionally. But some of these cities around it are earlier. And we know that there's one city that we've done a pretty good bit of excavation on called Karahan Tepe. Karahan Tepe dates back at least 1,000 years earlier than Göbekli Tepe. And that's important because for those out there that don't know parts of the history, forgive me a digression, but humanity's always lived in a ice age. So when you hear about global warming and all of that, it's all farce. Humanity evolved in at least 18 degrees colder weather than we have today. And about 14,000 years ago, give or take, the Earth goes through cycles. And about after every 70,000 to 100,000 years, we go through a gradual warming. And that gradual warming can last from 10,000 to 20,000 years. And then we go back into the ice age again, but it's cycles, and it has to do with the Earth's movement inside the solar plane. It has to do with our tilt on our axis and our angle to the sun. And all of those things are really what affects it, right? So we had gone about 14,000 years ago, roughly, into one of these warming cycles, and that takes hundreds of years. And when it gets warmer, the ice sheets decrease. What that means, though, is the ocean rises, right? And so the seashores gradually move back, but that's okay back then because, we don't know that they had property or advanced civilizations. So people adapted easily. Then 10,900 years ago, we had a bad day, and either a comet hit the Earth or a volcano eruption hit it. We don't know. But suddenly, instead of the nice warm weather, the temperature suddenly dropped again. And it dropped a lot. We know that within 3 years, according to ice cores in Greenland, the temperature dropped 18 degrees again.
Jeez.
And so suddenly North America was covered with ice sheets. And suddenly, people who were living out on plains that had lots of wildlife and that were basically had adapted to the warm weather because they'd had over 1,000 years of warm weather. Suddenly these people found themselves in the cold. But the good thing about cold, one, we evolved in it, and you can always kill things and you can build houses and things like that, and you can wear furs. So there's ways for us to cope with the cold. And we did. We prospered. The other advantage is when it gets cold, I mentioned the ice sheets, right? As the ice sheets come, suddenly all of this land that was underwater during the warming period suddenly becomes seashore. And if you want to see a map, you look right now on Google Earth or any of that, and that continental shelf around the United States, that was all above water during this little ice age. We call this little one the Younger Dryas because a flower that only existed in the previous big glacial period suddenly started blooming again. And so these people prospered. And so clearly these must be the people who, because we found settlements. There's not a lot of them, but we found settlements, and we know that, for instance, Bakula Tarla, it actually had sewer systems, and it had stonework and evidence of communal buildings and personal buildings, all the things we think of as a modern society. But so we were prospering and in this ice age. And then we had another really bad day. And I know this is kind of a variation of what you asked me, but we had another really bad day. And then on that day, something really bad happened. It may have been a solar flare, which is the evidence I've seen leans toward that. It could have been another volcano, or it could have been a comet. And, I mentioned comets and asteroids. It's important to know that Earth has been hit, at least in the last few million years, by 160 asteroids and comets of large size. At least significant number of them are 5 kilometers large, which we call planet killers. So we know Earth has been hit. We've just been lucky. Most of the time it hits the oceans because they're a bigger target. But something happened 9,700 BC, and where from the other ice age I mentioned, it took hundreds of years to warm up. Evidence right now suggests it could be as few as a week, or it could have even been in a matter of days that the ice sheet over North America was gone, and over Siberia and over Europe. So
Wow.
imagine seashore that during these ice ages was 30 miles from where it is today, right? Overnight or within a few days are underwater. Tsunamis, we know that at least some of the tsunamis we've been able to find evidence for, and it wouldn't all have been at the same time at all these different places, right? Because Earth's a big place and it takes time for the water to hit there and all that. But imagine 100-foot tall tsunami going through. Even today, if someplace like Charleston or Savannah got hit with 100-foot tall tsunami,
It'd be
they
gone.
would be obliterated.
Yeah,
right?
it'd be gone. Yeah.
And imagine then they're left beneath the ocean. So all that evidence of the civilizations that had settled along those seashores is wiped out. So our archaeological record is just gone. The places that survived are places like Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe, and places that are in a raised place above the flood zone. And we find that even in Mexico. Mexico, they just recently, within the last few years, found a cave where there's evidence of human occupation 29 to 30,000 years ago. Everything changes. Our whole history is
Exactly. Yeah.
And so, to get back to your original question, where's the commonality of these religions? I think these are our gods, so to speak, not to be sacrilegious, the survivors. So if you were one of those people who civilization had been along the seashore and you survived the initial flood that wipes it out, you're going to be struggling for hundreds and hundreds of years, right, to even survive. You've lost everything. You've lost your civilization. You've lost your social network. It would be like today if a nuclear weapons detonated 100 miles above the Earth, we go into an EMP effect and we're thrown into the Stone Age. Well, that literally happened to these people. The people who weren't affected, though, are these people who have the technology to build places like Göbekli Tepe, that have the technology. They understand Karahan Tepe, I mentioned earlier. Karahan Tepe actually has, that's a city, has a little temple that's actually aligned to the solstice. And when the solstice happens, first light that emerges comes through a window in one of their temple rooms, goes through a portal in the back of their temple room and into another room, and it illuminates a human head carved three-dimensionally that juts out about 1.5 feet from the wall.
And that was done 10,000 years ago.
Yeah. And so, this amazing, so it shows they had all this advanced knowledge. And so imagine if these are the survivors of this disaster, and they go out and actually start helping the people that have, been decimated. They teach them how to grow food again. They teach them about domestication, how to build a house, how to, do all of these things that were just common knowledge before the end of the Younger Dryas. They have to reteach them. And so how would you, if you were someone who had been living again in a pseudo Stone Age that had been recreated because of this disaster, right? You don't have any kind of education. These people would appear to be like gods. They can, build a building out of stone. They can tell us when to plant and when, because they can calculate how the stars move. So all of these amazing things, all these amazing things can just simply it's like literally they become the legends, they become the gods. I'm not saying that they are God. I'm just saying to someone in that situation, they may be perceived as it. And so that could also be where that common word daius eventually comes from. It may not be that it was referring to a God at all. And that's not to say there isn't God. So, people's religion is, their personal choice, their personal belief, but they still have to, it still could be in some of these cases that's what it's this mistaken identity. These technologically advanced people. I believe it was Isaac Asimov who came up with the idea that a significantly advanced society and their actions can be viewed as magic, and that's kind of what we may be dealing with. That humanity, we're like cockroaches. We try to survive, and we've done a good job of it. But when we lose our knowledge base, when we lose our technology that makes us who we are, maybe at that point we become like our Neanderthal brothers back there, who disappeared 40,000 years ago. Maybe we can become extinct. But if someone gives us the opportunity, if we know that someone gives us a foundation myth, here in the United States, I'm old enough to know that at least when I was a child, we received all this indoctrination about, George Washington never told a lie, cut down a cherry tree, et cetera, et cetera. And we know that a lot of that's just mythology, right? It's a legend that's been created to at least attach to the historical figure. And I think that's where a lot of the religion comes from. And one of the there's a bizarre tie-in that's still really fringe. Okay, I say it's really fringe. In the Sumerian mythology, the first there are three primary gods. There's a council of seven. You've heard them if you've watched any of the science fiction TV shows. They're called the Anunnaki. Mm-hmm. But the three main gods are Enlil, Enki, and then there's a goddess called Inanna. You've heard about Inanna even if you don't know it, but you haven't heard her called as Inanna. You've heard her called as Easter or Ishtar. You've heard her called Aphrodite or Venus. It's the same goddess. And in the Sumerian and Akkadian myths, she's the first marriage, and she's represented by, in getting married, it's her and her husband are literally holding arms with each other, right? Forming almost a capital letter H from a statuary. When they were doing some of the work at Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe, one of the pillars literally has the letter H, and they're two human figures holding hands.
Really?
Really.
So
right, and literally right below it, there's another set of characters that we know for a fact existed 17,000 years earlier and became Proto-Turkish. So this representation could suggest that Inanna, that religion or idea, may have a linkage to these. And that's 5,000 years earlier. So when we start talking about religion, there's just so many aspects that you can be like, wow. And there's so much we don't know, because a lot of at Göbekli Tepe, everybody knows about the big columns, 18-foot tall and all that, but they don't know there's all sorts of little carvings that we've written off as art all around it. And also for hundreds of years before we even found it, people would find pottery shards and little plaques that had all sorts of like squigglies on it. And they just said, oh, that's art. That's art. Couldn't possibly be anything more. But those, now we're starting to see some of those match up to what's carved in Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe and so many of the other sites, that we may have another language that may be the language before it all ended.
Wow.
Yeah. And this is the kind of thing that keeps me up at night.
Listen, Listen, and I told you from the beginning, like that, if in another dimension, I hope in another dimension, in another timeline that I am getting to do the research that you got to, because that would just be it would just be I can't imagine like the stuff you've seen and are able to connect together, and it leads to more and more discoveries, and it just opens up so many doors. And it's really too bad that more people aren't able to, really experience some of this stuff, because I
Well,
think it would change a lot of people's perspectives on things.
yeah, but it's not all wins. I've died twice, so the third time I may not get a get out of jail free card.
Well, hey, you don't mess with the wrong demon. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
yeah.
Well, Kyle. Okay, I mean, we could talk forever. This is so fascinating, but I want you to tell people where they can go find some of your books, and where they can find just some of the stuff that you've done, if they want to, if they want to continue, you know, um, feeding off the education and the knowledge that you have on some of these subjects.
Well, let's see. So I've got a couple of them here. So this is my book called Ghost and Demons: The Lost Things. This is actually the second edition. The first edition came out about 10 years ago. And much to my surprise, I didn't think anybody would read it. But it was designed to be a textbook explaining all the different things about the paranormal, like the real science behind it. When you see blinky lights on TV, what's that supposed to mean? How sound works and all that. So, and then I wrote a section in it on talking about what the different kinds of paranormal are, and even went to, well, I guess what made the original book famous is it had sections on all of the top five exorcisms, the real history. And unfortunately, I made the mistake of actually outing the young boy who was behind the Exorcist case, and I messed up his life. I didn't know it. I thought he had already died at that point. But so as a result, this book I found out was so popular that it got used as textbooks in a bunch of universities around the world. And so they recently, I guess about a year ago, the universities in Australia reached out and said, "Hey, if you do another version of the book and update it, we'll give you a commitment." And so they did. And so I updated this with all sorts of cool extra stuff in it. So that's Ghost of Demons, The Lost Things. And then if you're interested in the real history of demons, I've got Forgotten Lore.
Mm.
I've published 14 books, so I've written a lot. And I've got stuff that's not paranormal. I tracked a con man around the world. I spent 10 years doing it. He married over a dozen women, stole their money, was run for Congress, was run as was going to be nominated as a senator. He was on 2 presidential campaigns, but more importantly, he founded a sex cult in New Zealand. And
That could be a whole nother episode.
yeah. Fascinating character, and I just totally. I got obsessed with him, and
Mm-hmm.
I can literally tell you what he had for lunch some days. But the coolest thing in his case, so toward the end of writing the book, it starts. The history book is giant because it's literally a lot on him. But I found that he had paid a stenographer to transcribe his lectures or his sermons at his sex cult. And so there was a public version of this cult and a behind the scenes, but he had a photographic memory. So I reconstructed 120 of his hour-long lectures.
Now, why are these not reels on your Instagram page that you're reading these?
That's actually been something that I've looked at, and it may happen at some point. And I've pursued that. I actually was in negotiations with a broadcaster at one point to do something with it, but that collapsed because of their financial issues. So maybe that'll come back as a project, but I love. So anyway, he's an amazing character, and that whole series is called The Love God. Um, yeah, that's another inside joke. But I've got 14 books published, and most of them are still on Amazon. The Lost Things is actually they have the wrong version of my name. So the one on Amazon for Lost Things has KYLE as the author for this book, and we're fighting with them to get that fixed. But all the rest of them are published under KYL Cobb. And
now, do you have a website or?
I do, poorly maintained, but thelastgasp.com and also thelovegod.com. But I'm very poor with social media and stuff like that because I'm staying so busy. But up until before COVID, that's a dividing line on the planet. I used to be at all the horror cons and the science fiction cons. I lectured at Dragon Con for years and years and years, and Scarefest and all sorts of those type things. And I tried to cut that way back. So because I'm working on the dissertation right now, I'm not going to be doing as much out lecturing as I used to. But you never know when I'll turn up.
Well, we'll put links in the description so people can come find your books and find you. And you know what, Kyle, I think maybe we will have to have another conversation on the books. Not on the books, but we'll have to put one on our schedule sometime down the road, because I have a feeling that there's going to be a lot of questions and a lot of comments after this episode. People wanting to discuss some of the things that you've discussed, because it's really quite fascinating for sure. So I appreciate you taking the time and hanging out. And I'm going to have to send a message to Sonia and tell her she hit another number one hit is recommending for the show.
You got to pimp Sonia Lee, because she's got a new album coming out too, and she's a great country singer. So.
Yes, and we talked about that on our episode. So I'm waiting. I've got something special cooking for the second part of that episode. So I'm working on that. So I'm going to put two. It's going to be a two-parter. So I'm not going to give it away here, but I'm going to. But yeah, thank you so much, Kyle, for coming on and and just kind of giving us this is like a college class we just took.
My pleasure. Anytime.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the From the Shadows podcast. Until next time, never shy away from the darkness or what may be lurking in the shadows. We are out.
God only knows what's hiding